Well, good morning, guys. If I have not met you yet, my name is Tom Hypes. I'm the pastor here at the church, and I'm thrilled that you're here with us as we continue a study that's all about being chosen. We're only 1 week in, and if you're stepping in for the first time, don't worry, we'll get you caught up, keep everybody on the same page. But we've been looking at what does it mean to be on God's team, how does that work, and how do we have it in such a way that it actually brings a change to our lives, not just for ourselves, not just for our family, not just for our friends, but for the world that's around us that we're called to reach. And so far, as we've been kind of looking at this from that kind of mentality, we have looked at two parts of it last week. One is how are you chosen to be on God's team? And God's team, by the way, is the church. And then secondly, what kind of team player, what kind of attitude are you bringing to the team? How to be on the team is actually probably the most important thing I can share with you if you have not yet come to know Jesus personally. And I want to define that a little bit. And the reason I say that this is one of the most important, if not the most important thing, is so that you stop and listen. Because this really is the foundation that everything else is based on. I talk about this every week, and I know I talk about this every week. And there's a reason for that is because it's unbelievably important. And I want us to be ready to be able to answer the question of how do I get saved or how do I come to know Jesus. I also share it pretty much every week with the youth group. I pretty much share it every time I'm talking to the nursing home. I pretty much share it every time that I'm talking pretty much anybody, anytime, whether it be a group or as individuals, because it's the most important part. But yet I'm no longer surprised that people still ask me that question, even though oftentimes they're in these meetings with me, because a lot of times we can kind of let things glaze over until it's that one thing that we needed in that one moment. So make sure you hear this. Everyone is chosen to be on God's team. You simply just have to choose it back. You simply, the way that you become a Christian, the way that you come to know Jesus, the way that you are saved, the way that you have an eternity with Him, the way that you have an intimacy with Him now is by saying to God, I know that Jesus is the Son of God, and so He is Lord and I'm not. And I believe in my heart, died and rose again. I get to accept that mercy and grace I do not deserve, and I'm giving my life back to the one who created it. And I know it sounds too simple, but there's two things within that. It is that simple because He made it that simple, and it's just that hard because you're relinquishing your life back and your control back to the one who really knows how to do this in the first place. I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily do life real well by myself. But following God is where I start to find things that I get to celebrate. So everybody is chosen to be onto the team if we accept it. And then we talked about what attitude do we bring into it. We talked about different type of team members. There are those who join the team that think they are God's gift to that team, and they're lucky to have me. There's people that take and are on the team because they're best friends with the right people who chose those teams, and so it's kind of like this popularity clique type thing where they come onto the team and they just kind of coast because they've always hung out with the guy that was picking the teams. There were those who have been so beat down by life and have messed up so much and have been told that they are worthless, that they are the bench warmers who say, well, I can't really bring anything to the team, and you usually kind of feel like your last pick. And none of those are what God takes and drives us towards. He drives us towards the type of attitude we kind of compare it to Rudy. You remember that last week, that Rudy movie, where we come onto teams saying, yes, He chooses everybody, but I don't deserve it. None of us do. So I'm on the team is a huge gift and a huge passion, and I'm going to bring everything I've got onto the field, and I'm going to leave it all on the field, and I'm going to take and do things that I can't do by myself with the team, and that kind of excitement and that kind of passion coming in changes everything. So we really look at that attitude. And again, if you want to go deeper into that, those podcasts are always available, both video and audio on the church website. You can pick those up. But today what I want to do is I want to kind of go to the next step of not just looking at our attitude, but looking at our perception. How do we perceive life? How do we perceive our walk with Jesus? How do we perceive the church? What type of perception are we bringing to the table? Because one thing that's 100% true is the perception that we bring to the table will dictate the choices that we make. If you want to make choices that are good for the Lord, you have to look at your perception first. Perception will dictate the choices that we make as we come to the table, as we come to the team. I'll give you an example. It's a little bit of a hot button one. I'm sure different people have different views today on it, but I know this week that many of us, including myself, spent some time watching some testimony on your computer or on your TV or whatever the case would be. going back and forth between Judge Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you have completely skipped your TV and any kind of news broadcasting. Judge Kavanaugh is someone that is up for the empty seat on the Supreme Court. He is being vetted through this first part of the system by a council of senators who were to vote on whether or not he would move forward to being vetted by the entire Senate. And as they kind of got to the end of this, there came forward some accusations from a young lady by the name of Dr. Ford that when they were younger, about 35, 36 years ago, that this Judge Kavanaugh, had committed some sexual assault against her at a party when they was high school or college. You know how I am with details. I don't remember kind of some of those type of things. But and just for fairness to him, she's not saying he raped her, but nonetheless, it's a very serious sexual assault accusation that she brought to the table. So they had her come in and do her testimony, and they had Judge Kavanaugh come in and do his testimony. And as people watched the testimony, people had different emotional responses. Different people believed different details and different folks. People started going to social media because we all have to share our thoughts on the matter, and started going out there and putting memes and comments and thoughts and everything else. And I can just say to you, if you look at all of that, a couple things. One, I don't know the truth. I was not one of the three people that claimed to be in the room, so I don't know the truth. Everything that I'm going to bring to the table, that most of us bring to the table, is our perception on who we think is lying and who's not. And if you think that he committed the assault, then you're going to look for those details that support that thought from that perception to the things that you look at her as a patriot that is coming out as a victim, that has found her voice, found her strength, and brought it to the table. If you think he didn't do it, and that this is some kind of democratic ploy to take and lengthen it so that you lose a conservative judge, then you're going to look for other details, and you're going to raise other things up, and you're going to make other passionate responses out on social media. It's the perception. It's the perception that is dictating those choices. It's not the truth. I'm not saying that we're not supposed to watch and try to figure out what we think and stuff, and in all honesty, that's great and fine. They've got to make that judgment. I don't. But our perception is driving us much more than truth is. And that's just how it is with us. We're human. Our perception has a great deal of power within our lives. And Peter has some things to say about that when it comes to taking and being a passionate team member within the church for Christ. And I want to look at that with you. So we're going to go back to 1 Peter. This whole study is primarily in 1 Peter. If you've not gone to 1 Peter before, it's in the back of the book, before Revelations, but after all those letters from Paul's, like, the Romans and the 1st, 2nd Corinthians, you're going to find it pretty easily. But it is a little small, so don't be afraid to use your concordance. If you don't have a Bible, there's always Bibles in these baskets on the floors underneath the chairs or in the row before you. You can have one of those. Keep one of those if you'd like. And for all YouVersion folks, it came to my attention, we're having a little glitch today with the YouVersion Live. So if you're not finding it in YouVersion Live, just get a little crafty, go to Facebook, go to either my page or the church page on Facebook. You're going to find a link. When you click it, it should open it up for you. If it does not, that was your last-ditch effort. So use a piece of paper and a pen and don't start raving telling me it's not working. But that's the best we got. I think it's up and running. We just had a small glitch there. And YouVersion, for those who don't use, just an online service we use that brings all the scriptures together. It's working for Dell, so we should be up and going as we start digging into some different perceptions that Peter gives to us that we can lean into that drives us to maybe some new choices depending on what perception you've been holding on to. Now, usually we kind of read from the beginning to end and different sections and talk about what we find. Today I'm going to get a little out of order to look at the scriptures in a way that just really feels like the Holy Spirit's flowing today. So make sure you go back later and dig in deeper to see what the Spirit has for you in your first-hand blessing. But I'm going to start out in verse 9. We'll come back to verse 1. But I'm going to start out in verse 9, where Peter is writing to us, and he says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of the darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." In the three sections that we're going to be reading today, I think there's a different highlight in each one. And I really want to kind of focus in on this standpoint that we are called to be holy. And Chris is going to put that up for our note takers so that we can take and write them down as we go. But we're really called to be holy. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means in our lives, because sometimes I think we have the wrong perception. In this, as I was going through, there's some words that I circled through. Like I circled chosen, I circled holy, I circled his own possession, because I think if we have been raised with the perception that God is kind of this tyrant, or that we are just his servants in a way, like we're slaves, or that he is putting us under his foot, or that he is abusive in some way, we're going to see that differently than what I think Peter is calling us to see it as. What we see when we're talking about chosen is we're going right back to the whole point of this whole service. What we talked about in the whole series that we're in is that he's chosen us and we have chosen him. And I think the best way for us to relate that to something that's a little bit more tangible to us, something that I think would change at least some of our perceptions, is that all throughout the Scripture, over and over and over again, God compares our relationship with him like a healthy biblical marriage. Now again, depending on what background you have with marriage, that's a whole another ballgame. So make sure you got those adjectives in there that describe that out for me. Because what he compares it to is a healthy biblical marriage. In other words, he gave us, as he created us in his image, healthy biblical marriage to understand something about our relationship with him is one of the reasons why we have that. And in a healthy biblical marriage, and again, I'm sure if you go to India and you can look at some stats to see whether or not arranged marriages last longer, or whatever the case may be. But for me, on my 18th wedding anniversary, she's such a sucker. Yes. That's it? You guys are horrible. But everybody's like looking at my wife and clapping, good job. Good job. But I am thankful that I chose Jenny. Very thankful that I chose Jenny. And I'm thankful that she chose me. And that it wasn't an arranged marriage. Because I think it's more like what God intended. Because God, when he created us, could have created us and forced us to love him. But he gave us a choice, albeit that the tree of knowledge was a horrible choice and gave us all kinds of warning about it. We had to choose to love him, or else it wasn't really love. And so I'm glad I chose her. I'm glad she chose me. And when it comes to our marriage, if we're doing it right, it is holy. And when I say holy, I'm not saying it's perfect. You still with me? I think a lot of us define holy as I've got to be perfect somehow. And that's not what holy means. Holy means it's set apart. That you are set apart. I'm set apart for Jenny. I took a vow to forsake all others. She is set apart for me. She took a vow. You still with me? I'm set apart from any other or any other temptation that's within there. I have made a vow to be set apart to the one that I chose. And no matter how you look at it, I belong to her. And she belongs to me. That doesn't mean I'm going back to the 1800s where I'm being oppressive to her and I want to come home and I want the house clean and I want the dinner on the table and I want my slippers in her hands. I gave up on that years ago. Years ago. But it means that we belong to each other and that we are one and we are intimate. And when you start looking at your relationship with the Lord as a healthy biblical marriage, your perception will change some of the choices you're making. When you look at the things that you struggle with that are of the world, when you look at the things that you embrace that are not of God, when you look at these things as being adulterous before the one that has chosen you and that you have chosen, doesn't the thought process of, I'm so glad God is patient and hopefully sooner, at least I'm doing less than I used to, just not on the computer as much as I used to, looking at porn, so I'm doing better. That's like me looking at Jay and say, isn't it good that I'm just sleeping around not as much as I used to, Anya? Right? I'm thankful God's patient. I'm thankful that he works with us. But my commitment to getting right, to be holy, to be set apart for my God, with my God, to be one with my God, changes the way that I live life. And it's one of those things that we have to embrace as early as possible, because if Satan can trick you on this, then he'll put you into places that's much harder to get out of as you're working through the ripple effects of adultery, being shattered, and of brokenness. This, I'm going to spend just a little extra time here because I think it's applied to all of them. This past Wednesday night, we were in a youth group, and if you've been around for a while, I like to brag on our youth because they're awesome. And we've just kicked off our community nights. We're just a couple of weeks in, and we've seen some physical growth, we've seen spiritual growth, and we're right now going through the book of James. And as we went through James 1 and the bringing out just different thoughts, I mean, you guys know how I am. I like to read a little, talk a little. They're doing more leading in the study than I am, and they just come up with phenomenal things. But we come across a verse that I want to share with you today as well. And Chris is going to put up on the screen for me. It's just a simple verse from James, chapter 1, and verse 15. And James tells us this. He goes, "Desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's fully grown, brings forth death." Okay? Now, I like, just from the way my mind works, I like to break these down into like easy chunks. But what he gives us here is a formula. And we'll put it in the formula form up there. But basically, when we have a desire and we lean into the desire instead of reject it, that he's comparing it to having a baby. It's conceived, and it gives birth to sin. And whenever we have a temptation, right, you haven't sinned yet. Jesus was tempted. Jesus did not ever sin. So we know temptation is just part of our fallen world that we're in. But when we decide to lean into it, it gives birth to sin. And sin, if you don't catch it and it continues to grow, brings bondage. I think everybody's on board with this, right? When I was talking to the kids, I told them, I have areas in my life that I made mistakes, and I got my own dumb stories. And if I ever ran for Supreme Court, there's probably some people that can come up and testify what an idiot I was in my early 20s. Never sexual assault, just to make that clear. But I have my areas of mistakes, but I told them, like, when it comes to smoking, and we all know how hard it is to get out of the addiction of smoking, as it's very challenging smoking, that what I did to get out of the addiction of smoking was the easiest way to do it. I guarantee you, easiest way to give up smoking. I never started. Right? I mean, I have my own mistakes. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm just saying in that one area, I've never had a lit cigarette to my mouth, so I've never had a desire that I couldn't control that put me into a place of addiction with it. That's how this works. If we can get it at the desire, perfect. If we get it when it's young, great. You still with me? And this is what he's calling it. When we look at ourselves as the spouse of Christ, and we hold on to that, not self-perception, then things get easier. Let's look at it again from the marriage standpoint. I'll give you this example. Young lady in her mid-20s, she had a boyfriend when she was like 14, 15 years old, her first love. The one got away, they broke up, they went in different directions. And now she's in her mid-20s, she runs into him when she just happens to be at a grocery store, let's say Myers. And when they run into each other, they find that the past has taken them different directions. He had been married, he had 3 kids, but he's now divorced. She's married with 1 child and still together. So as they're talking, they start thinking, grass is green on the other side, and they start remembering the old memories and all of these things coming into place. And he decides to give her his phone number and says, "You should call me, we should have lunch, and we need to catch up." Now, if in that moment she looks at this as, wait, I'm set apart from my husband, we have chosen each other, this is the commitment that's there, I belong to him, he belongs to me, what is the right thing to do there when it comes to this model? Trash the phone number. Don't go to lunch, right? That would be the right thing to do. Because if you lean into it, then desire can give birth to sin. Sin can put you into bondage, and it can devastate everything. There was 2 paths right there in that moment that you can choose to lean into. And the same is true for our walk with the Lord. In this case, why I celebrate my 18 years of marriage with Jenny, I can tell you that's a true story of my first marriage with my wife, who went into her ex-boyfriend of Myers. And I can tell you about the pain and the devastation. I can tell you about what it did to our family. I can tell you what it did to my son. I can tell you what it did for me when it shut me down for a year. I can tell you about the ripple effects 20 years later. If we can catch it at desire, then we are leaning into freedom instead of the bondage that Satan wants to put us into. So just that shift of seeing that different perception can lead us into some new choices. He says you do this so that you can proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into the marvelous light. I cannot proclaim the excellencies of him who called me out of darkness if I continue to have adulterous affairs with the darkness. It's a perception. It's a shift. Next one. Let's go back. I feel bad for taking you away from verse 1, so let's go back to it. Verse 1 says this, as he's talking. With this being true, for a point of our conversations, so put away all malice and all deceit and hypocrisy and envy and all slander. Like newborn infants, long for the pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow up into salvation, if indeed you have tasted that the Lord is good. In this case, I see a little bit of a shift from the perception of that I'm a spouse to the perception that I'm an infant. That I'm an infant. If you look at what he's writing here, he says, first off, look at these things that we have here. Here's malice, and malice is basically a desire to do evil. And here's deceit where we're concealing or manipulating things for our own advantage. Or look at hypocrisy, where you're claiming standards that you just don't live by. If we look at envy, you're being resentful towards others, and you have a longing of what others have. And slander is an action or a false things that you are saying, either because you're being malicious, or you have a very limited view of the real situation, and since you don't want to be humble, you want to make a whole case out of that little view. And so you talk about people, or you slam on people, or you get into the gossip end of things, not realizing maybe I just don't know everything in their life. Maybe they made a decision off of information I don't have. And we see that a lot, whether it be in our homes or in our workplaces or our church, whatever the case may be, you just see that in the world. And what Peter's saying is you've got to put that stuff away. Now, when he's talking about putting it away, he's not talking about like, okay, I'm glad I lost 20 pounds and these pants don't fit in any way, shape, or form, and I got the new pants on, but these I'm going to put just in the back of the closet just in case I eat too much at Thanksgiving, right? I need my fat clothes just in case. That's not what he's talking about. It's like, don't put it away for, kill it, destroy it, toss it in the fire, do whatever it takes that it is gone. These things wage war against who you are in your very soul. These things wage war against everything that God has intended against you. Smack it down. Destroy it. Whatever it takes. It might be in some areas something that you've caught on the desire end of things, and so it's gone quick. In other things, it might be that you let that sin grow some, and it's going to take a little time and help and accountability to get there. But kill it. Get it gone. Be as an infant. In other words, what he's calling us to is humility. Humility. Humility is the second section that we're going into, because in reality, this is the way that we live. This is the world that we're in. Well, I think one of the reasons, oh gosh, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to be hot button again. Talked about the whole Senate hearing things. It's September. Can I talk about Christmas? Yes. What's your perception against Christmas? My perception is I love the Lord. And I love Christmas, and I have no problem with Hobby Lobby right now. But listen, I won't talk a lot about Christmas, but I will talk about A Christmas Carol, the old Ebenezer Scrooge end of things. If you've never gone down like the Hyatt Theater and watched that Thanksgiving, the Ebenezer Scrooge play, I don't get a chance to go down to it very often, but it's really, really good. I've always liked that story. And it's been very popular and it's done really well over decades, because I think in some way we relate. In some ways we relate. We want the betterness of ourselves, and we want to make him the caricature that we don't relate to. But the reality is, as you get to know his story more, as the play goes on or the story goes on, he's only that way because of lost love, because of experiences in his life that didn't go well, because of hurt and pain, the way that the world has treated him, the things that he did to become successful in his own eyes, and by what the world standards are, there's a little bit of Scrooge in all of us. In all honesty, there is. You might love Christmas or hate Christmas, haters. But there's a little Scrooge in all of us. We've all been beaten up. And Peter's not saying you're wrong for being beaten up. What he's saying is God wants better for you. And a lot of times that we get into that spot because I've got to be my own man. I've got to be the one that is together for my husband and my kids. I'm the one that's got to bring home the money, and I've got to raise up to here so that we can start doing more vacations together. There's a lot of things that come into the place that put us where we think this is normal, that this is okay. And for someone to suggest, here's your best plan. Become like an infant and just start over. And don't go in there trying to have all the answers. Go to God and say, I just need some milk. I've been chewing on this fat for so long, and I know it's going to look stupid for me to, in front of all the people at church, to think I've all got together to say, Jesus, I need just some peace milk. I don't know how to have peace anymore. I need to start over with that. Or I need to have some joy milk, because I'm in here trying to come up with these big things that I can present and everything else. And, here I am, a facilitator of a Bible study, and I've got to go in front of them and say, I just don't even know how to have joy anymore. But Peter's saying, if you can perceive yourself as an infant, then the power is right in front of you. If you're at a point in your life that you're just like, I don't even know how to do it anymore. I have no answers. I just need to relinquish it. And I'll tell you, we might lean towards depression or anger and fear in those moments. Can I tell you, you're probably closer to Jesus than a lot of other people say, I've got it all together. You're probably more primed than the people that you're looking at on Facebook wishing that you had the life like theirs. Humility. See ourselves as, when we're children, Jesus says, come up to me and just climb up on my lap. All you guys are watching and judging this is what you need to become like. And Peter goes so far as to say, if you've even tasted Jesus, if you even went to one Easter sunrise service and you heard about the gospel message of Jesus Christ and said, really, he did that for me? Or if you ever had a time, like maybe in high school, that you hung out with some other Christian folks and you had youth group and it was just so passionate and easy then, and it doesn't feel that way anymore. If at any point you ever tasted just a little bit of Jesus, said, man, that was good, isn't that just enough to chuck it all and start over? Isn't that enough to talk to your spouse or your friend or to somebody else around you and just say, I've been struggling for a long time and I need some milk. My teeth hurt. My digestive system's all messed up. It's a perception change. It's a perception change. If you find yourself on that James track and you're just overwhelmed, go back to the top and have a conversation with the one who's good. He is good. And he's waiting for you there. You start to catch how perception changes everything? This world tells you to perceive yourself in a way that God never intended. And it puts ourselves into places that he never wanted. Let me give you one more. Go back up to verse 11 with me. I told you I was going to jump around a little bit. He says, Beloved, I urge you, as sojourners and exiles, to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against that soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of the visitation. Beloved, I urge you, I just implore you, I beg you, I reach out to you to take and move forward in a different way, to abstain from the passions of the flesh. Lust, put it away. Hatred, away. Self and selfishness and how I see things all the time, put it away. Hatred towards others, put it away. The slandering, it's done. The gossip, kill it. It's over. I beg you. He's not coming with a lack of humility himself. He's not saying, hey, I've got this all mastered. He's saying, I beg you because I want better for you. And you should want better for you. And if you got little ones, they're watching. And if you don't have little ones, if you go back to what Paul told Timothy, all older women, all older men, you're mentors. And the kids see what you put on your Facebook and how you act around church when you think nobody else is listening. I urge you, put this stuff away. Put it to it's gone. Put away these passions of the flesh that rage against you. And he invites us to be sojourners or exiles. Sojourners or exiles. And this is why I think he invites us to another perspective. If you don't know what a sojourner is, a sojourner basically is one who's traveling through a land that is not their home. If you got lucky and you had a family that had money, and I did not, and you took a year off to go backpacking across Europe, which I did not, you were a sojourner in Europe. That's basically what it is. You are traveling through a land, but you don't belong there. You're not home there. And I've been on those kind of trips before. If you're an exile, basically what exile says is that you once belonged there, but now you've been kicked out. You're in exile. You might even still live there, but you are no longer part of that community. And Peter says, wouldn't it be great if we just embraced that here? This is not our world. This is not our home. This is not what we have been called to. We're just traveling through. And some of us are making decisions like this is home. You can't figure out why you're not comfortable here. You're not supposed to be comfortable here. Some of us have been exiled and we're trying to figure out why we don't fit in. You're not supposed to fit in here. We're supposed to be longing. It's a good thing. And when we have that perception, all of a sudden all this other stuff that used to be so important is not quite as important. Whether or not my kid is the team captain, or whether or not they're getting straight A's, or whether or not I've got my pension fund this way, all those things are not compared to all my children being raised with the foundation of Jesus Christ under their feet so that they can move forward with the path that He's designed for them. Am I living a life that takes and impacts others? Well, I'm being that light, and I'm taking and having what He puts here, a life that when people talk about me, and they will talk about you, if you put yourself out there, they will talk about you, that when they speak against me, that everyone will see my good deeds and they'll glorify God. That I don't have to defend myself in front of the Senate. I just have to be godly. And they'll see that. And the thing that's great about that is that He gets the glory for it. And I love the fact that this is His glory on the day of visitation, because what that means is they saw your actions, they came to the Lord, they were there with you as well. That's what matters. We're just sojourners. We're exiles here. Stop pretending like this is home. And I'm not preaching to you. I'm preaching to me too. Stop pretending like you're home. I was with my parents, my dad's birthday about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And my mom has an interesting background. She had a father, a physical father, that was a player. She didn't really know him. He left, I think she was 2 when he left. But he kind of roamed from town to town looking for lady folks to have some fun with, and he had many children. We knew about a biological sister she had that was given up for adoption at birth because he had left them. It took a long, I think Mom found out about her when she was in her early 30s. We didn't have the internet, so it took like 13 years to find her. And they have a good relationship today. But just within the last, Mom's 72, 74, within the last 10 years, she has started finding other half-brothers and half-sisters and having relationships with them and talking with them. Many of them she's never met because they're out on the West Coast. But she is just amazed at this one sister that she has that married a Native American man who still lives on the Indian reservation. And the stories that she shares with them, because they are living there, they're protected there, they're part of that community technically, but they are looked down upon and treated as outsiders, even though he was born into the tribe, because he married a white woman. And she'll never fully fit in. She's a sojourner. That's not our heritage. That's not something that we do. You married a white woman, and so she's treated differently and outside. And so she's a sojourner. She's traveling through that place, but it's not home. And he is treated on the outside as well because he's been exiled because of what he has done. And so they're in the community, and all these things are going on. This is pretty much where they want to spend the rest of their life, but it will never be home. And we can learn from that. As kind of despicable as that sounds, like, really? Really? But one, that's the world we live in. And two, God gave us a much better world, and we're the ones who put ourselves in this place. So I'm not going to say a whole heck of a lot about it. But it does challenge me to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. What if you truly thought of yourself as God's biblical, healthy wife? Jesus is the bridegroom. Sorry, guys. We're the brides. Get used to it now. The church is the bride. What if you saw yourself as that and took it as serious as you would if you were having a biblical marriage? What if we saw ourselves as infants and stopped trying to pretend like we have it all together when we just simply need Jesus? And what if we saw ourselves as this is not our home? When I'm with you guys, this is the closest that I have to home, because this is His church. That's what we got. What differences would that make? Where would those perceptions lead us? Because perceptions dictate the choices that we make.